Hello, I'm Iseult Bottoni, Programme Manager for IDC EMEA Systems, Infrastructure and Solutions Group. And with me today I have Eszter Morvay, Research Manager for our EMEA PC Tracker. We published our preliminary PC results for Q4 2011 earlier this week, and Eszter is going to share with us what those results mean. So, firstly, what happened in the EMEA PC market in the fourth quarter, and also full year 2011 results, and was it what you expected?
The market indeed performed in line with what we have expected. We've expected the market to continue to decline. We had a forecast of minus 9.7%. In reality, the market was slightly better, but it still declined by minus 6.5%, which actually brings the full year to minus 7% decline. That means about 103 million units shipped. So that means that for the 4 consecutive quarters, the EMEA PC market continued to decline.
Okay. Looking at Western Europe, could you elaborate on what the key inhibitors were? So, for example, are we seeing an adverse impact on the market from the escalating debt crisis, whether it be austerity measures or credit contraction, confidence in the business market?
Yes and no, it actually depends very much so on the country. So if you look at some of the southern European markets, of course Greece, Italy, Portugal and Spain, they've really recorded a very severe decline in line with expectations. So there the impacts of the credit crisis is much more severe. But actually the commercial markets in some of the other countries really surpassed expectations. So if you take Germany, for example, or the other German-speaking markets, or the Nordics, or even Belgium, they actually continue to post some really good growth, even in the commercial segment, where we have anticipated an escalation of the current financial crisis.
Okay. What about competition from other devices, given the expected spend for the Christmas period?
Well, it's definitely a big issue in the consumer market. So consumers have been feeling the pinch from the economic crisis and debt crisis. So people obviously have less money to spend, which forces them to make choices about what kind of devices they are buying. Ever since the arrival of iPad in particular, customers have been more inclined to spend on media tablets and smartphones. And this trend continued even in Q4, which we expect to be another big quarter for tablets as a preferred Christmas present, but it had a very strong negative impact on consumer demand for PCs, which continued to decline by 16% in Western Europe.
Okay. What about inventory? There was mention, I believe, in Q3 of it being quite high. Has that eased?
Yeah, definitely. It has been a problem ever since last year, when there was a major sell-in for Q4 and demand was actually not as strong as anticipated, and ever since then the vendor community and the channel has been working very hard to sort out the inventory issues. So that has been, inventory levels have returned to more manageable levels by the end of Q3, and in fact we have heard a lot of comments about people being almost overly cautious not to repeat the same mistakes all over again. So inventory is not an issue anymore, but rather the cautiousness of the channel to take in new orders, not being sure whether they can really sell it. But we are seeing a much better match between sell-in and sell-out right now.
That's good news. What about the shortage of the hard disk drives, which resulted from the flooding in Thailand earlier in the year? Has that had an impact on Q4?
It did have some impact on Q4 for sure. We have anticipated a more limited impact for Q4, given that a lot of the shipments coming to Europe by sea. So by the time production is run, it takes a long time for shipments. So for December products to get to market and to get to the stores, they were actually manufactured back in October, November, and hence the impact in that sense was rather limited. But what's also limiting the impact is, again, really the overall weakness in both consumer and commercial demand as well. So the gap between demand and supply in the end was not that great, but we're still evaluating the exact impact by country and by vendor.
Okay, great. What's the situation across the emerging markets of Central Eastern Europe and Middle East and Africa?
The situation is actually quite different by region, because Central Eastern Europe actually performed quite well and in fact outperformed expectations, continuing to grow by more than 7%. So it seemed that consumer notebooks in particular did quite well in the Christmas period and helped boost the market. But Middle East and Africa actually contracted by about 6%. Now, Middle Eastern shipments were quite strong 1 year ago, so we're certainly seeing an unfavorable year-on-year comparison. But other than that, we are certainly seeing that some of the markets are impacted by, again, ongoing turmoil with regards to their political systems.
Of course, yes. And how do the vendors perform? Can you comment on the top vendors? How do they do?
On the top spot, it was still HP, so HP maintained a very strong leadership and managed to maintain the market share almost the same as last year. Again, they actually had a really good performance in Central and Eastern Europe, and in fact, for the first time, they gained the #1 spot in Central and Eastern Europe. They had a lesser or weaker performance in Middle East and Africa, and a mixed performance in Western Europe as well. Traditionally, HP has been very strong in the commercial space, and they had some inventory issues on the consumer side. But in Q4, this has gotten reversed, and now they had a quite good performance on the consumer side. But after several quarters of growth, they've sort of returned to a declining trend in the commercial space. Mm-hmm. Now, Acer has been declining for quite a couple of quarters. They are not that strong in the commercial market, but they are mostly focusing still on the consumer SMB markets, and they have been struggling with a lot of inventory ever since the end of last year. So they continue to decline across EMEA and again Western Europe in particular. They also managed to clean up their inventory more or less, but in the process they've hurt a lot of their channel partners. So there is quite some apprehension in terms of doing business with Acer, and we feel channel partners are a lot more cautious when they take new orders. Mm-hmm. Now in third place, we have a bit of a change versus last quarter. Asus had a really good Q3, so they popped up to the third place last quarter. Now they had a little weaker Q4 compared to Q3, so now Asus is back to fourth place and Dell is back to third place. They had a really strong quarter, particularly Middle East and Africa, boosted by a couple of large deals in the public sector, and also in Western Europe. They've actually done really well in the commercial space. So Asus is down back to number 4. They still had a very good performance, but again, historically they used to have a very high share of netbooks, and again, demand for netbooks have really declined. In fact, in Western Europe, it has gone down by 50% in Q4 year over year. Mm. So clearly they are also suffering from this major decline in the mini notebook space. And then we've got Lenovo, and they've maintained their 5th position, but they're one of the vendors continuing to consolidate market share quarter after quarter. And on the one hand, they are benefiting from the Medion acquisition, which has been completed back in August. So they are really making strong inroads in the consumer market, but they continue to gain share in the commercial space as well, both across the SMB and enterprise segments.
That's great. Thank you very much, Esther. We'll be back in Q1 2012 to give you an update. Thank you.